Hi, everyone, and welcome to our Comic-Con panel on music and storytelling throughout the Walt Disney Company. We have an exciting group of panelists with us today, and each of them are experts in TV music. I'm honored to have them with us, and I'm excited to get started. As I introduce each of our panelists, I ask you to not only listen to their job descriptions, but also to the shows they work on. I think you'll see that at the Walt Disney Company, we have a varied variety of shows that cross all different genres, and it's pretty amazing and it's pretty exciting. So without further ado, let's get started with our first panelist. Besides being one of my closest friends, Dawn Soler is the head of music for ABC Signature Studios. She does many things there, but most of all, she works on shows like Grey's Anatomy, A Million Little Things, and the Blackish family of shows for ABC Signature. Next, we have Jay Stutler. Jay gets to do the fun stuff working with TV animation for the Walt Disney Company. And he is the brains behind Phineas and Ferb for Disney Channel, The Moon Girl for Marvel, and Proud Family for Disney Plus. And last, but of course not least, is my friend Jeremy Summers, who is the head of music for 20th Television. Jeremy works on shows such as The Simpsons, Empire, and This Is Us. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. We're excited to have you here.
Thanks for having us, Peter.
Yeah. I'd like to start with just a little bit of background because what each of you do is so unique, and I think people are really interested in music supervision. So can you tell us what got you into your job and what attracted you to work at the Walt Disney Company? Dawn, would you like to start?
Sure. I was a music supervisor for many years, mostly feature films. And about the mid 90s, I did my first film for Disney called Blank Check. And from then they became one of my biggest clients. I did all the Gary Marshall movies and Enchanted and just a whole number of them. So what got me into the job specifically was just sort of the yin and yang of it, the right brain, left brain. You know, you could be very creative on one call, but then on the next call, you're negotiating a deal. So it was super satisfying. My journey to television was the head of production at the time called me up and said, "Hey, would you like to start the music department at ABC?" And I said to him, I've never done television. And he said, "Well, I want you to bring film music quality to television." And that was very interesting because it was at a time when I saw both the content and production of television becoming more film-like. It was also, I was noticing that artists who would always say no to television uses were starting to see the value of television. And I think at the time I may have coined the expression, television is the new radio, because it's absolutely become that. So because of my love of Disney, and they were my biggest client, it was pretty easy to come and say yes. So that's why I'm here.
Great. Well, we're glad you're here. Jay, how did your journey begin?
Well, my first Disney experience actually started when I was 18 years old. I came from more the music background. I was a musician in the parks. I was a member of the All-American College Band at Disneyland a long time ago. That was my first foray into the impact that the Walt Disney Music Catalog has on its audience, but in live form, right? I was performing in the park, so you could feel that connection between the audience and the musicians and the live entertainment. In the beginning part of my career, I was more a music director for live entertainment. So theatricals, Broadway review shows. I actually lived in Nagasaki, Japan for 6 years as a music director at an international resort there. I thought that I would spend the rest of my life in live entertainment. And then in the late 90s, I met Matt Walker, who was running TV animation music back then. Back then, it was both the direct-to-video component and the television component. Matt brought me in to oversee the television department. And like Dawn just mentioned, I had no experience in this media. But you quickly realize that music process is the music process, whether you're doing it for stage, live entertainment, or film and television. And I fell in love with the speed at which we have to work on a daily basis and the constant, juggling of a multitude of things. It just fits my DNA. We're shot out of a cannon on a daily basis. And you just hope at the end of the day, you have a soft landing, right? And that's the television music business as it is today.
That's such a great point, because I think most people may not realize the pace we work in television, and to not only write such great stories, but execute them in the way that we do is amazing, and it's a phenomenon. So, and don't think I didn't realize that you managed to slip in some live, Radio Disney and Jams performances while you're here, Jay.
Exactly.
I'm aware of it. Jeremy, let's hear your story.
Well, my background is a little bit different. I was a very successful independent musician, meaning a failed musician. And that led me into the music business. And so I had spent, the better part of my career working with artists and working with recorded music. So I had ultimately grown to be the head of marketing for Interscope Records, and had worked with Lady Gaga and Lana Del Rey and kind of on more establishing marketing campaigns. And so TV and film for me was one of several outlets. I had transitioned from that into a company called The Firm, which was a management company. And it was there that one of our clients, Ice Cube, was a part of launching Straight Outta Compton. And so we were, producers to that. And through our time there, we had actually transitioned that company into a TV production house. And we still had our label and our management clients. And for me, I'm would you call that a married in to Disney? So I joined 20th Television working for Gary and Dana, because I actually saw TV much in the same way. I saw it as a great way to have a big impact on artists' careers. And in what I had learned about storytelling, I saw that this was an opportunity to do it not for 5 shows or not for a few films, but to actually do it for a swath of incredible storytellers. And in our world, we had just launched Empire. Glee was a massive music show that our studio had produced. And so I think they looked and said, okay, we want someone who has a background in music, understands it, but can also help to drive, outside of what happens on the screen. And so, I showed up really never having serviced the role of supervisor, other than begging supervisors to play my music, but had worked with, artists and creators. And so coming in, I saw it as a great way to continue to be, of service and of support to artists. And with what we do, we're massive in adult animation, and music is still a very important part of the DNA of our studio through our storytelling.
So as I listen to everyone, it's clear there's no direct path to this position, right? And I have to believe that those different perspectives help with the storytelling, because none of you went to school to be a music supervisor. None of you learned this the same exact way. You're all bringing something different to the table. And I think I have to believe that's why it works so well within Disney. So it's an interesting observation for me. Let's move on to some of the meaty stuff and the fun stuff with your shows. At Disney, we set the bar really high, not only with the people we hire, because we hire the best, but on all the creative levels. Is there a scene or a program that you worked on that received a tremendous amount of publicity, or perhaps the press and the audience considered a TV first?
Nashville was I think pretty groundbreaking, not only that it brought country music storytelling to a pop place in the in the world, but I think what made it so important is that the songs were storytelling in themselves. We were always really, really careful that the songs were pushing the story in a way that a musical does. And it was interesting because of that, when I went on to do Godfathers of Harlem, which is basically a period piece about Bumpy Johnson, I remember I had my first meeting with Chris and Forrest, and I said, guys, I have a crazy idea, but let's approach the music like a musical. And they looked at me like I was crazy because we were talking about gangsters in the 60s. And I said, no, every song we will create and it will tell the story as we're going along. And we brought Swizz Beatz in and we shared this with him. And I think that we have been very, very successful in that. So I would say, back to your, probably Godfathers of Harlem is a really unusual idea of how to use music.
You know, I never thought, it seems so obvious now that you say it, but I never thought of an individual episode as a standalone musical. But I think it's a perfectly appropriate way to describe some of our shows. And Jay, I think with animation, you must experience that a lot, because I think in animation, the songs really are part of the story and propel it forward. Have you had something that's been amazing for you that got more press than perhaps you expected?
You know what? You mentioned it in your intro, Peter. I think Phineas and Ferb broke the mold for us. Because look, currently I'm touching probably 35 properties. Almost every single one of them is a song-driven vehicle, right? It's pushing story. It becomes another character for your show. And we're in the high volume business. So we're producing about 550 original songs per year for all of our properties. But Phineas, this goes back to 2007. You know, we made the pilot episode with Dan Povenmire and Swampy Marsh. There was no contemplation for songs. We made the pilot, it was just underscore. And to be clear, that show would have been hugely successful even without a note of music, because the characters are so good, the storytelling was so good. When the show got a green light, in my first meeting with Dan and Swampy, the finance team, production executives, you know, we have to build a budget to sustain the creative. And I asked Dan and Swampy, there were no songs in the pilot. Do you see songs playing a role in the series? And Dan said, yeah, maybe there'll be a song in every 6th episode at most. But the caveat was, Dan and Swampy and much of their writing team were comedy writers, but they were also songwriters. So what we had to do, and this is why it broke the mold, we embraced that notion, right? Let them play to their strengths, which is writing stories, write songs that are comedic, that are well crafted. But we also had to draw a line in the sand because Dan was like, look, you know, I've got a home studio. I'd like to write the song and I'd like to also produce it in my garage. And it was like, time out. What we can do, let's start a ecosystem where you guys sketch out the song. I want to partner you up with a musical talent that I believe in, that I feel you will connect with creatively and will be a great collaborator with you in all these song moments. Let's just start there. They wrote the first one, they collaborated together, they sketched it out in their, you know, bullpen in a writing session. Danny Jacob, who we had brought in to do all the music for this series, absolutely blew away the production value. So now you have these very well-produced songs that are smart, funny, character-driven.
Listen up, people, and I'll teach ya. Got Phineas and Ferb in a backyard feature. Every morning, Phineas, he gonna say, brother, what you gonna do today? Now you see we're having fun playing under the sun and get in line, cause the wet ski's running. A backyard beach, a backyard beach.
And it mushroomed. So what started out as maybe one every 6 episodes turned into 452 songs in the lifespan of that series. And it drove so much business for our company, because as a company, as you guys know, we are so well positioned that if you create a show that is a franchise driver for the company, it will reach all the tentacles throughout the company, parks and resorts, the music group, you know, touring division, and the music is what is leading the charge, because we're writing the music to stand on its own outside of the storytelling of one particular episode. And it is driving a lot of business for the entire company. And that's where real success is for us. And now we apply that same kind of viewpoint across all of our shows, which is why we're doing over 500 a year, which is why I'm death by a thousand paper cuts is the.
So basically what you're saying is all of those times we approved higher music budgets for Phineas and Ferb, it was justified.
Exactly.
I get it, Jay. Excellent.
Well, from this mother, thank you, because Phineas and Ferb was a perfect babysitter for me for many years.
Absolutely.
I have a little story of my own to tell before we get to Jeremy, because it's kind of the segue to Jeremy. When Disney acquired the Fox Studios, I knew that the Simpsons were coming over, and I knew that they created a lot of parodies. And as the so-called Disney guy, I knew I was going to be tested. And I'm not kidding you. The first day after the closing, one of my first emails was from The Simpsons asking me to give my opinion on a parody song. And I was like, this is the test. And I blame Jeremy Summers for that entirely. So,
well, I actually think there are, if you talk about The Simpsons, they have so many examples of things that have pierced the culture, including the most recent Morrissey parody, where Morrissey actually commented on it, and I know his manager really well, and that got a lot of pickup, But I was actually going to go back, Peter, to Grey's Anatomy. Okay, when you talk about firsts, I was on the label side when Chasing Cars was in that pivotal scene in Grey's Anatomy that Don and Alex would have worked on years ago, and that was one of the truest and earliest examples of a song creating emotion and connecting to an audience, so that not only were people in the moment of that scene, but they wanted to go out and discover Snow Patrol. They wanted to go out, they wanted to go see them live, they wanted to go, in terms of that was the big pop culture moment for them. They had an album before, but that was a huge breakthrough, and I think that, music when it's done at its best, that it helps create a magnet to the show, and it becomes a calling card for the show. One of our proudest moments in recent time, was the outfitting of Central Park, which is a show that we have on Apple. And one of the big ideas, it's Lauren Bouchard, who is a fantastic creator we've worked with for years on Bob's Burgers and many more, and Josh Gad, who has a pretty deep relationship here at Disney with a lot of different segments. We wanted to have a guest composer for every episode. And, Don and Jay know, like, are you crazy, trying to do that and the amount of work involved. And so, getting the first one was the hardest, okay? Because it's a brand new show. Really, all you have to sell is connection to the creators and belief in their vision. And so far, we have had Sarah Bareilles, we have had Danny Elfman, we had Shaggy, Big Boy, they've all contributed songs. And what was so cool for me in our little world of music, when we launched the show, to see sites like Rolling Stone talk about music and the guest songwriters. Pitchfork, I hadn't been on Pitchfork for years from my times at Interscope. And so it was so cool that there we were, again, breaking through the conversation and attracting people to our shows. And I think that's a great example. Jay talked about driving the entire Walt Disney universe. It really starts with piercing culture, and leaving an impact on people. And I feel like music, when it's done best, helps the show do that.
Yeah, and Grey's Anatomy is a great example, but Glee is an all-time amazing example. My regret is I wasn't here when Glee was in production, because I would have loved to work on that show.
250 million albums.
Amazing.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah. So you mentioned, Jeremy, where you have all these guest songwriters and guest artists and lots of licensed music perhaps. So that must mean that you need permission or rights from the record labels and in some instances, music publishers.
Yeah.
So what role do the music rights holders play in your storytelling and in securing music? Do they sometimes get in the way? Are they helpful?
Well, I think, we would all say, yourself included, that some of our closest friends are at labels and publishers, and artists and artist managers. And that's, because, they can be really important to us, in telling the scene, telling the story. In some cases, where we've done biopics, where some publishers have needed a little more convincing, we're grateful that we have relationships with them to be able to walk them through some of the creative, and in many cases, people have opened up to licensing to television, and what I always like to say is the budget that we have is the budget that we'll pay. And I'll tell you what we have every time. It's not I have this much, you have that much, let's meet in the middle. And I find that the publishers and labels and artists in many cases are some of our biggest advocates for helping us land songs, because, when you have a new artist, that can really help them gain a lot of traction in building their audience. And when you have a familiar song, and a publisher knows that its value, they're also willing to work with us because we have a relationship the other, 364 days of the year.
Well, each of you should give yourselves a pat on the back, because I watched the evolution of music licensing, and I remember certain artists would not license to television. And I truly believe that over the years, we were able to turn that around because of the great storytelling, because of the high production values. And so I think that that's incredible. I mean, we think of the first example are, the Rolling Stones. When I started, we used to, shy away from them because we never could license it. And now, like you said, ABCO and that whole family has just been such tremendous partners to us in our TV show. So that's amazing. So that's on the commercial music side. But one of the things we also do really well as a company is we create a lot of original music. And I think, Jay, obviously you might create the most. But Dawn, also at ABC Signature, there's a tremendous amount of composing work, live musicians, scoring. It adds a certain dimension to our shows. What I would like to share with the Comic-Con fans is, how do composers know what to write? Like, how do you work with a composer to get them to see your vision and to write the appropriate things for our shows?
One of the big goals for me when I came to television was to make the underscore better, honestly. And I was a little nervous because I was afraid that my film composers wouldn't come aboard. So the first thing I did is I went to Mark Isham, who's a very dear friend, and I said, hey, you want to do television? And he came aboard, and so did so many of the other composers. And not to say that the TV composers weren't good. I just don't think that they had the opportunity. It's really interesting because if you look at cue sheets, which is kind of keeps track of all the music. When we first started, when I got here in 2005, we did sort of an analysis of how much score was in a show. And in a 22-minute comedy, there was like 4 minutes. Well, now it's up to 16 minutes. And in a drama, they would have had, in the maybe 12 minutes. And now we're looking at 32 minutes. And that is because underscore can give you so much in pace and emotion and storytelling in sort of the most natural way. So it's interesting when a composer comes on, it's funny because I always tell the composer, you're the expert in this, so be sure that you speak your mind. And I think it was flipped for a long time where the producers would tell the composers what they wanted. But I think it's now becoming that the composers are being more, using their voice more because they have done it. They do know what to do. The other thing that's interesting is I know producers and directors always say, well, I'm not musical. I don't speak your language. And I always tell them, remember, a composer is a filmmaker. So if you just talk to them about the emotion and the story that you want, they're going to translate that into the music.
Excellent. And do you think it's possible to tell a story in an episode using only score, or do you think we always need some commercial music?
No. I mean, you look at the great shows. Lost was one of them.
Lost. It's a great example.
Yeah, Lost. I think we may have used 8 songs the entire time, but we hired the great Michael Giacchino, who has the most beautiful themes. And we had a real orchestra, and that was one of the early times that we used orchestra, and we saw the effects of real musicians playing these beautiful scenes. So no, I don't think so. Then you go on to Once Upon a Time with Mark Isham and all the beautiful themes that he created for all the different characters. And even a show like American Crime, which had 7 minutes of score in a whole drama, every time those themes presented themselves, you knew that this was like you leaned in because it was a time when you really need to listen to what the characters were feeling. So no.
Can I pick up on Dawn's comment about the composer being a filmmaker? There's a great commercial that a classical radio station used to have, and it was just a shot of a baby crying, wailing, and then you could hear the wailing, and then it stopped, and you heard Beethoven. And all of a sudden, it changed the entire context of that shot. And it made it actually quite beautiful, this baby's emotions. And it's a great example of, I think, how a great composer and any number of those 3 or many that we work with are able to help shade a scene and shade the story to fit a different emotion. And one of the great things that we do, and my wife loves to watch when we're doing this, is actually putting different score or needle drops up against picture, and you see that it accents different things. It pushes it. This one creates tension. This one creates joy. And it's one of the specialty craftsman skills that the music department and the music teams have, and that we get to see come to life.
And I'll top off of that, Peter.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, Jay.
Well, the interesting thing in our world, like to Don's earlier point, we've all been here a long time, and we've seen so much evolution in our business. And there was a time where the animation television side was the lowest rung on the entertainment ladder, right? And we had to change the level of expectation that we were going for, right? And back then, you were put in a position that what we were sourcing to the network executives is, this is who we should make the show with. You're sourcing talent that already has this experience in this world, because they needed to have proof of credits, proof of past work experience for us to feel comfortable investing in their talent. And what that does is it limits the talent pool, right? Because you're only hiring people who already have the experience. And so we spent a lot of time breaking that mold, because the reality is, in our music business, there is so much talent out there who are like second and third on someone else's team, but they've got a lot of talent and they're just waiting to have their name up in the lights, right? So it's getting to that next generation of talent immediately starts to change the game, right? And then in the animation world, storytelling is everything. And the best example that I can show is just go watch the Mickey Mouse shorts, our brilliant composer, Christopher Willis, and you will see musical narrative. Many of those shorts have no dialogue. The music is the narrative. like fully. It's just music telling you the story. But even then, you have to evolve. You can't just do Carl Stalling kind of writing, because that will feel dated in 2021. You have to tell a story that feels of today, that's modern, but has some, throwbacks to, past, writing styles. But in animation, music is the narrative by large and part.
So, the question I get asked very frequently is, people are dying to know how animation works, okay? And, to us, we live it, we know it, but could you tell us a bit how animation actually works? Like, do you write the songs first? Do you do the animation first? How does that all get put together?
The way I could best describe it is, think of every song as having a child, because it is about a 10-month process.
Okay.
Always start with the song concept first. So we're meeting with the series creators, the network executives, and every song goes through its metamorphosis, which starts with the germ of an idea. How much story are we pushing? Kind of what are we inspired by? Genre, tempo, energy, all of that. And then our musical talent creates a demo. And then we go through the song incubation period where we, develop the song, make lyrical changes, but we have to get that song locked to length as quickly as possible, because that song then now drives the animation process. That song gets on its production track, and now the team of animators start choreographing, storyboarding, send it overseas for animation. 9 months later, it comes back to us. We see the final animation. In most cases, we're doing final production to that song sequence. And then it's rinse and repeat 500 times a year. So every song is about a 10-month process from start to finish.
So that's incredible, first of all. So thank you for that explanation. So Jeremy, I'm wondering, for the animation that you work on, I have to imagine it's a different process, and you don't have 10 months to work on parodies and other songs in our animated series.
No, I mean, we're turning things around, pretty swiftly. But I will say one of the things about, that the process is consistent, and that is the song needs to start from, the goals of the song, right? Here's what we want the song to do. Here's how we want it to play with our characters, and here's how we want it to push the story or move the scene. And then we go out and we're turning things around. It's remarkable what our composer friends are able to turn around quickly in terms of quality and speed. But one of the things that I have marveled at in animation is that, we produce what we consider to be a radio track. And that really, you can listen, and I have.
So is a radio track just a longer version of what's used in the episode?
Well, the radio track would be the entire episode with all of the dialogue, okay, and the song, so that you iterate your song same way that Jay would. Then you have your voiceovers, and then you put together your radio track, which is, I think, the best animation. You can actually turn off, close your eyes and listen and follow the story, this, as well as with an animation. And so the songs are part of that, as part of the voiceover. And when you follow it, it's almost like a radio drama. And then when it comes back to you and you see it all produced, you go, oh, wow, you really see the art of how an animator can accent something in the audio track, the same way that we do all the time, the other way around,
I'm curious how many people, after watching this, are going to go home tonight and watch an episode with no video. Let us know how that goes. Don, I have to go back to something you said before. When you're speaking with composers and they sometimes don't know how to speak with the producers or vice versa. So some producers, I think, know a lot about music and are very happy to tell you how much they know about music. And other producers do not. How does that work? Is it better to work with someone who has a strong opinion, or someone who really is relying on you?
Well, you know, as a music supervisor at heart, of course, I always want to bring my thing to the project. And I'll tell you that I know that people form their music tastes when they're in high school. So I always try to find out when someone went to high school, because it lets me know what kind of music they're gonna like. And I mean, you guys think
That's why I love the 80s.
I know you do. You and Paula Abdul, man. Uh, so I always, you know, I always try to understand where they're coming from. Look, if the music is good, it's fine, you know, because I want my job, and all of our job is really to present a menu. I always liken everything to food, is to present a menu to our filmmakers, but it's really their position to pick the meal. And our job is really just to help them find a meal that everyone's going to like. So yes, a lot of times producers will write songs in, and, you know, usually they write in Led Zeppelin that you can't get, or it's, you know, or you get a script and there's $1.5 million worth of songs in there. And so it's our 3 jobs to go through and help educate them, help them find other choices. And there are the times where they're just sort of wrong. I hate to put it any other way, but, you know, they have a show that has to sell to a certain demographic at a certain time on a certain distributor, and it can't have Beethoven and Tchaikovsky through it. It needs, you know, 9 Inch Nails. So it is our job to help them realize who their market is and guide them. And, you know, it's tricky, but in some ways that is the fun of what we do, because I think a huge part of our job is to be the translator between not only the composer and the filmmakers, but the filmmakers in the studio, and the filmmakers and the network, and the studio and the network. There, you know, there's sometimes communication that doesn't happen there. So our job is really making sure that everyone is on the same page and is united, so you can come up with the best product.
Right. So Jay, with the shows you're working on, how much, like, do the songwriters write the lyrics based on the story or the plot you provide to them? And do you sometimes ask them to include specific lyrics, you know, to help them tell the story, or is it really, are they in the driving seat with some of that storytelling?
You know, there's no one size fits all, and every show is slightly different. And, you know, this is part of the early conversations when you're creating the musical DNA of a show. That's an important component, because, again, almost every single show is a song-driven entity. And post Phineas and Ferb, right, when we allowed Dan Swampy and the entire writing team to not only write lyrics, but actually write the songs, that opened Pandora's box in my world for incubation of story editors who are also amateur lyricists, to be actually be able to write that, some of those story points into the script to be used as inspiration. Now we have to be guarded with that approach to make sure that we're not incentivizing, you know, something that, you know, cheapens the end product, right? And by and large, most of the songwriters that we bring in love having some of those temp lyrics embedded, because, again, the way we hire, typically, we will spend so much time in the development process casting the right musical talent for a particular show, and then they write all the music for that show, right? So they know they're going to be writing 150 plus songs for Sophia the First or Elena of Avalor, and sometimes those lyrics just gets us to the finish line much quicker. Now, having said that, we also let showrunners know you're not getting Alan Menken and Glenn Slater if it's important for you as a story editor or a showrunner to have your lyrics embedded in the song. So that eliminates a portion of our talent pool in this music community, right? So those are all the conversations we have early on in the genesis of any show, but everyone is kind of through a different viewpoint.
You know,
Can I
as
add to that, Peter? Just
Please.
because I brought a clip of an interesting example that of something similar to what Jay is talking about, where we had a American Dad wanted they actually wanted marshmallow, and we called and he wasn't, for some reason the timing didn't allow for it, but it was actually that team that said, I think The Weeknd is a big American Dad fan, and I've known those guys for years since I was in Canada, and they're Canadian, and so we called over and said, hey, would The Weeknd ever consider, what are the chances? And as it turns out, Abel is a huge fan of the show. But a great example was the show writer wanted to write the song, but it was really important to Abel to actually collaborate on the entire episode. And, which could be scary in a lot of different worlds. But in this world, he was a fan of the show. He understood the mythology of it. The show writer, Joel, was a big fan, and they just got on like a house on fire. And he ended up guesting in the entire episode, and then, wrote this awesome song.
I'm a virgin, never got close enough, cell phone blowing up, but I'm waiting for the right person, trying to act super tough, but inside I'm a 12-year-old boy.
And then the timing of that set up that we were able to work with the network and all of the communications teams, that it was going into the Weeknd album release. And so 2 weeks later, he had the #1 album as well. And so it was just like a million points of light of the right show writer, the right artist, real collaboration, and really creating an event.
And I'd just like to say that, I do work with Alan and Glenn a lot. And, in most cases, we bring them on as the EPs to work in conjunction with the other EPs, because their ability to tell story is so important. So we put them in the writer's room when we're breaking stories, and Alan and Glenn will say, "Ooh, I can tell that story." And so, like animation, the song is driving what we do. So it's a very important relationship when you're talking music at all, to really understand the mechanics of what music can do.
And I will dovetail, just as we're talking about Alan and Glenn, I think this ties into some of the earlier conversation that we had about the evolution and importance of television today. Unlike when I started, when especially animation was the lowest rung, we did a Tangled animated series based off of the feature, and doing television animation was never something Alan was ever going to do historically. But because the level of experience was so high and continues to be high, we were able to get him and Glenn to do 32 songs for our Tangled series. And it ultimately ended up getting Alan his EGOT, because he won an Emmy based off of his work on the series. And so I think that's just a realization of how strong the medium is in television today.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Dawn tried to get Alan an Emmy as well for Gallivant.
Well, no, it was actually before that. It was for The Neighbors.
Oh, it was for The Neighbors.
Yeah.
But you also tried hard on Gallivant.
Well, thank you, Jay, for finally getting our friend Alan his.
Just send me a list of any other songwriters you're trying to get EGOT status. Send them my way, and we'll make it happen.
I do have.
That's what we do here, making the Disney magic, right? You get an
synergy.
EGOT, you get an EGOT. Well, I think speaking of accolades and awards, I think it's time for us to get to the fun part of this, which is, I would love to hear from each of you. What are some of your favorite TV music moments of all times? It can be something you've done, something someone else did, but I'm very curious to hear from the experts what you guys love. Todd, you have a big smile on your face. It looks like you're ready. Do you want to start?
Well, I think we can all say that every night one of our favorites happen, because we all work so hard to put the songs in our shows, and so many things happen. And when you watch it on television, it's like, ooh, how exciting. I will say we have a show on D Plus called Big Shot, and with John Stamos. And there was a scene where his father died, and it was a funeral, and then it was a whole wrap up. And we found this song, Besides You by Lights. And it was just such a wonderful experience because the song had so many different, it changed so much. And between the instrumental and the lyric, we were able to use it for almost 4 minutes over a bunch of scenes. And it took the episode to a level that was just, the producers called and said that it brought them to tears, and they had been filming it so that recently was a big, exciting one. But I will say that the last episode of Grey's this season is going to probably be one of my favorites, because we're going to use an Ingrid Michaelson song. And Ingrid Michaelson is one of those characters that Grey's discovered, and we've used her so many times.
When the world was ending, I'd hold you.
I'm still alive.
And we talked about the places we'd never
People
been.
often laugh at that answer, but it's not a joke.
When the world was ending, we'd hold on to the past. 'Cause it's
Are you
all
responsible for this?
that we would ever see.
I'm gonna do things mine.
Being alive, it's everything.
Jeremy, how about you?
Well, sitting here thinking, there's a moment that I worked on, and then there's a moment that I'll never forget that I think changed music. The moment that we worked on was season 1 of This Is Us. And it was telling the story of Randall's father. He was an R&B musician. And so there was this great scene and need for a song. And I forget the year, but I think it was like 1963. And so the composer, Sid, called and said, okay, so I got to do the song. And, we've got this great vibe. And I said, well, I think if we're going to make a record, we got to make a record. Let's go and get an old studio and 2-inch tape and real players, and let's do it the way they would have done it, back in the Swampers world. And we created this sound, and Brian Tyree did an amazing vocal on it. And it's just this, it played beautifully. Dan Fogelman knows how to use music so well, which is an important part too. You need a creator who knows, you need an editor who knows. And it really created this special moment that I was really proud of.
Mother, don't you cry. We're gonna be all right. Open up your suitcase when you get there tonight. You're not alone. I'm always here with you.
Jay, what is your favorite TV music moment?
Honestly, there's so many. I guess the overarching thing that I would rally around is this goes back a while. We started making preschool content in 2004. And, I had young kids then, and I knew what kids music was represented by in the entertainment industry at that time. And to be completely honest, I wanted no part of that, right? But it's like, no, this is our assignment. And we're thankfully in a position where you can guide a redefinition of what kids music means to us as a company, right? And when we were developing Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, one of the most stressful and intense development processes I've ever been a part of, because there is so much importance to that show being successful, because it was the first time Mickey was ever going to be used in a preschool medium. And so there's a lot of intensity around that. And we struggled for months trying to find an identity for that show musically that was representative of the time, that was modern, quirky, fun, but wasn't oversimplified like what kids music can quickly become. And when They Might Be Giants sent me their demo for the main title and the hot dog dance, it was like, that's it.
Hot dog, hot diggity dog. It's a brand new day. What you waiting for? Get up, stretch out, stomp on the floor. Hot dog, hot diggity dog. Hot dog, hot diggity dog. We're splitting the scene. We're full of beans.
And then based off of the success of that, we've been able to kind of trailblaze a redefinition of what kids music is for us. And quite honestly, it's now continues to be my passion project, because we are getting so many amazingly talented artists who want to swim in that pool, because we've redefined the music so much. It's not just kids music, it's music for the entire family. It's smart, it's timeless. And, we have no difficulty getting interest from amazing talent, because now what happens is artists have done their artist career, they've been out on the road, they want to be home. And the perfect example now is it has led us to being in a long-term relationship with Patrick Stump, who's the lead singer of Fall Out Boy. He is now writing all the music, songs and underscore for our upcoming Marvel Disney Junior series, Spidey and His Amazing Friends. So to be able to see that arc is probably the thing I'm most grateful for.
Great. And we do sing the hot dog song in my house almost every single day. So thanks for that. That was actually going to be my last question, but Jay, you mentioned something about the Mickey Mouse Clubhouse theme song, and it got me thinking, what really happened to TV theme songs? I think aside from animation, perhaps, for live action shows, I don't see it as much. Dawn, how come we don't see it anymore?
It is my Achilles heel. Every year I talk to the network about, can we bring the theme song back? Songs tie you to content. And what better way to have a song that plays every week that sets you down. It's like Pavlov's dog. You hear that song and you're ready to watch your favorite show. I mean, that's what we did. It also separates the shows and gives them their own identity. But I will say, it's something that I've really enjoyed with streaming. We did a show, Little Fires Everywhere, and we had this huge main title. There were no lyrics. It was all instrumental. But the day after the first episode, there was a TikTok explosion of people dancing to the main title of Little Fires Everywhere, which was crazy. So I do think there's power in it. And I do think if anyone wants to join me and go into the network and say, we must bring back theme songs, I would be happy to go in with you.
I think you're right, Dawn. I think streaming, right, still allows the span to have a song. If you think about, that Cheers main title, right? We all know it. It was the thing that really identified that everybody knows your name, right? It set up the entire vibe for it. And that was at a time when remote controls weren't as, and 500 channels weren't the universe. But in streaming, I think if you look at what Ramin did with Game of Thrones, I mean, that is wow. And Succession, I think those are just great examples of, we all work on shows, but we're still fans of the craft of storytelling and filmmaking. And I think those are great examples of main titles that make you identify that this is the moment. I'm sitting down, I've got my popcorn, and put your phone on silent.
And those are all, the ones you mentioned were all instrumentals. And when you talk to people are always like, I never tune out. I listen to the whole, in Game of Thrones, I think it was 90 seconds, which is a long time, but you wanted to get that feeling of popcorn and sitting down.
And thankfully, in my world, Peter, as you know, we are still doing main titles for every single show. There are times, I will be honest, there is so much importance in the main title. It is the most important musical moniker that we have for any series. And these things aren't solved necessarily overnight. And there's so much anxiety baked into it because you have to get it right. But thankfully, we, our side of the business in kids animation still values it very much so, because it is the musical brand identity for every single show. And I always get a kick out of, like I remember Jarrett Reddick sent me, he was the lead singer for Bowling for Soup, who performed the Phineas and Ferb theme song. He has sent me videos. They start adding that to their set list, right? When they do live shows, and they'll start doing an acoustic version, then they'll turn off the mic and just cut to the crowd, all singing in unison, 5,000 people strong. It's powerful, right? So the brand extension that a main title does for any show is palpable.
Okay, so excuse me while I make a note. My next meeting with the network, we are addressing theme songs for television shows. If there's an infinite amount of space on streaming, I think we can accomplish this, guys. So that's our next project. Okay, I think we've come to an end. I'm so grateful for your time today. I think for me, some of the takeaways were, with the expertise of the people doing the work, such as yourselves, with the resources Disney is willing to, spend and employ to make great productions, and with the amazing talent we get to work with, it all comes together to create the great projects and television shows that we create and the great storytelling we tell every day. So I thank you for that, and I thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Peter.
You're welcome.